Good evening, everyone who joined our webinar today. My name is Aravik Ashkharyan. I am the director of ARI Literature Foundation in Armenia, and with a consortium of partners from Armenia, Georgia, and Ukraine, we are implementing a project called Visual Stories from Armenia, Georgia, and Ukraine. The project is co-funded by European Union's Creative Europe program, and our partners are Literature Initiative Georgia, in Georgia, of course, Komora Publishing House in Ukraine, and we also have one more partner in the Netherlands. It's Drawing the Lines platform, graphic journalism platform. So the project was about developing the comics and graphic storytelling fields in our countries. And within our project, we implemented this is the eighth and final webinar. You can visit our Literature Foundation's website and the YouTube channel of our Literature Foundation to find all the other webinars which were of different topics, helping new comic artists to develop their skills, to monetize their skills, to learn about the publishing. And now this webinar is about copyright issues connected with the comics art, comic books. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our speaker today, Laurent Melikian. Laurent is an independent consultant, journalist, and a critic specializing in comics. He is known for his sharp insights into the evolution of that medium, the comic art. He is a regular contributor to various publications. He also speaks at festivals and conferences, analyzing market trends and the cultural stakes of comics, both in France and internationally. Laurent Melikian is also a former collaborator for the Artist Society, ADAGP in Paris, and the publics manager for Cité Internationale de la Bande Dessinée in Angoulême. Laurent also represents Please Comics, an organization that he leads now, and he will tell us more about what they do. Laurent, welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm giving you the floor. For the audience, let me mention that you can write your questions in the Q&A section of the webinar. And at the end of Laurent's lecture, we will read the questions for him to answer. Thank you very much. And let's have an interesting evening.
Thank you very much, Arevik, and thank you very much to ARI Foundation and all its partners for inviting me this evening. I'm very happy to be here. And so I think that tonight we're going to be speaking about copyrights applied to comic art. So let me share my screen with you. Okay, it seems that I cannot do that. These moments, there we are. I hope everything is okay, because now I'm a bit out of screen, but so thank you very much for inviting me tonight. Arevik, your introduction was very good about my story with comics. It started a long time ago. I've been a journalist and a critic about comics for about 30 years. I worked for different magazines, different newspapers, weblog for a long time, including a comic magazine for adults, very well known in France, called L'Écho des Savanes. But as you know, as everywhere, press and magazine went down financially for the past 2 decades, and of course getting enough revenues from journalism became more and more difficult. So I had to diversify it and become like I would say a Swiss Army knife in comics by organizing events, curating exhibition, sometimes getting involved into publications of books. And at the same time, with other fellows with Armenian origins in France, we created an association, APPDA, Association for the Promotion of Comics in Armenia, and we run a festival in Yerevan, I'd say between 2007 and 2012. We stopped after a while, and now we're happy to see that I'm happy to see that comics creation is getting more and more important in Armenia, and I guess also in Georgia, and I've witnessed also very interesting things in Ukraine. As you said, I worked for an author society. I don't remember the name exactly in English, but it's an organization for collective rights called ADAGP that was in Paris, and I work for the Museum of Comics, or Cité Internationale de la Bande Dessinée in Angoulême. Now I just founded with two other comics professional an agency specialized into comics about 4 months ago. The name of the agency is Please Comics, Rights and Events. Our purpose is to organize events such as recently a meeting with Taiwanese comic creators in 2 different places in France, having this webinar tonight, but also representing rights for authors or publishers in many different places in the world, to be able to have their books that have already been published in their own country, in different places also, including France, of course. So we do work with creators from Hong Kong, from Finland, from Brazil, from mainland China, from France, from the US, including one Armenian artist. But I'm very happy to be talking about rights tonight because, for example, we were interested by one comic book, I wouldn't say which one, from one of your countries, from Ukraine, Georgia, or Armenia. And we wanted to represent that book, to help that book to be published out of its countries. But the problem we had is that we don't know who is the right holder, who owns the rights of this book. We know the author, there is a publisher, and the book was published with the help of public grants. But it seems that there hasn't been any agreement around that book. So for us, it's a problem, because if we start dealing with this book, if we start representing it and get, for example, a publisher in the US, and that the production of the book starts in the US, and that suddenly someone or an organization comes up and says, we are the right holders, and that deal has to be done with us, that's something we don't want to happen. So one of the main purpose of that of this webinar is to know better what are comic rights, what are, author rights, copyrights applied to comic books, and how to deal with them. For a case study, and as I'm talking with you, I think it was good to see the example of this character, Tarzan-like character, but that takes place in prehistory, called Ran. So Ran is well known, I think, by a comics creator from my generation, including in ex-USSR country. Ran was published in a magazine called Pif Gadget, published by Éditions Vaillant in France, and these Éditions Vaillant were very close from the Communist Party, which made this magazine being allowed to circulate easily in the ex-USSR. So I know many comics creators around 50, 60-year-old who knew this magazine and who knew very well this comic character, Ran, very, very well drawn with great stories. That was one of the bestseller in France until the beginning of the years 2000, about. But at the beginning, this character was created for the magazine Pif Gadget that was launched in 1969. And it was published into short stories of about 10 pages. And there was about one story each month. And the magazine itself was a weekly. So there was one of the round story each 4 issues. And it was one of the most successful character in this magazine. But no agreements were signed. For the publisher thought that his 2 creators, so that was Roger Lécureux, who was the scriptwriter, and André Chéret, the drawer. Okay, I say drawer. I don't know exactly which name to apply in English. In French, it would be le dessinateur. Sometimes I hear illustrator or comic artist. I'm not sure that it really qualifies the person who's drawing the comics. He's an author, he's not an illustrator. He's part of the building of the story, such as the scriptwriter is also most of the time part of the building of the story, even graphically. Both do have common work on both sides. The story, I would say, the narrative part and the plastic part. So to get back with it, the character was so successful that Éditions Vaillant needed more material to publish and hired a second drawer to draw more quickly and to have, instead of having 1 story per month, to have 2 stories per month. And also was reprinting the stories into some kind of albums that were sold and distributed in newsstands. At that time, that was a problem, especially for the drawer, André Chéret, who got paid only once as a work-for-hire artist. And it could have been a problem for the scriptwriter also, but as the scriptwriter was the editor-in-chief of Pif magazine, he wouldn't complain too much about it, because the problem is that the pages were created just for being published in a magazine in 1 issue. But was not supposed to be republished, to be taken over by another artist, because the creator has rights, he has copyrights, and he was supposed to get new rights, new revenues from republishing, and then from all other use that could be made of his artwork. So there were many exploitation, including adaptation into animated movies, toys, etc., around Rouen. And the creator, André Chéret, had to go through 4 different lawsuits to get recognition as a creator, as an author who was controlling the use that could have been done of his work. So the lawsuits were around the recognition of his part as a co-author for Raon. It's not only the story writer who creates such a character. Royalties for reprints, the moral rights violations, I will tell you later about moral rights, and plagiarism, as someone else started drawing his own creation without his acceptation, without his authorization. So that's an example to see what happens when there is no real rule, no real agreement, when you start creating a comic book. So during this webinar, during this discussion, we're gonna be talking about these topics. What are copyrights in general? And what are the copyrights applied to comic books? You might be surprised by some of them. So for copyrights and copyright histories, when did it start? When did creators of artistic piece of work starting having regulation around them? I know that some of the first regulations started in Venice in the 15th century. But from what I know, one of the first creator who really started to implement rights for his creation was Beaumarchais. So Beaumarchais was not a visual artist. He was a writer, and he was also a politician, a very good businessman at the end of the 18th century in France. So in between the end of the end of the royal era and the start of the Republic, and during the Revolution, he wrote, for example, the theater play Figaro's Wedding, that was adapted into an opera by Mozart. And the problem he had is that he was publishing his theater play. The theater plays themselves were sold as booklets. And then they were played in theaters, in many theaters all around France. And he wouldn't get any revenues from it, any royalties from it. So he created an author company, which still exists today. It is called, sorry, I have some blank of memories here. SACD, it's called Société des auteurs et compositeurs dramatiques. So this society was, the aim of this society was to go and see different theater owners and to get royalties from the tickets they were selling for the representation of his theater play. So during the 19th century, pieces of work in any fields of the arts started circulating a lot in Europe. And in 1886, first convention was signed by 11 countries for protection of literary and artistic works. So that was in Bern, in Switzerland. This first international law started growing. And in 1952, thanks to UNESCO, a new convention was signed about universal copyright. And the United States of America at that time had to join it, and about 50 countries were adapting it. And then in 1985, an agreement on trade retail aspects of intellectual property signed and was linked to WTO, the World Trade Organization. So you cannot be a part of, a country cannot be a part of the World Trade Organization if it doesn't recognize this agreement on intellectual property. So now more or less copyrights are recognized in every country in the world. Maybe some are not in it, such as North Korea or other very small countries. So I just want you to be attentive about one fact. You saw the poster at the beginning of. So I just had something ringing in. I hope it's everything is okay. So in the poster there is some copyright being showed here by François M. So François M that you see here is the photographer who took the picture that was used in the poster. So François M did a picture portrait of the three associates around Please Comics, so that we can have good pictures to present when we do events, or that we will put also on our website. And if I keep quoting him, it's not really because copyrights as far as revenues are mentioned, because when he produced an invoice so that we could pay him, on the invoice there was it was a note for rights transfer to us, stating that for the price we had paid him, we get rights for reproduction of the photographies he did for 50 years in every places. In fact, when we're talking about copyrights, we are talking about talking about two different rights: the moral rights and the patrimonial or economical rights. Moral rights, they cannot be seizable, they cannot be transferable, they're inalienable indefinitely. When someone produced an artistic piece of work, it owns him, he owes this piece of work eternally, morally, which means that each time this piece of work is reproduced or represented, he needs to be quoted. The holder of moral rights has to be quoted, and he has also a protection for his reputation and the integrity of his piece of work. Which means, for example, that there was probably something you've heard about in the news during the election in the US. Donald Trump, when he was a candidate, used some pieces of music for his assemblies. And most of the creators of this music didn't were not okay with that, and they were their moral rights were at that time were not respected, and that's something that happens regularly. The fact that for example, I would say for a comic book, for example, a comic book cover, it can be used sometimes, but then the illustration of the comic book cover, if it is used by a political party, the political party doesn't seem to be in the same line that the creator can go to lawsuit for disrespect of moral rights. So in my presentation, each time that I show some piece of work, I will always quote the right holder, the creator. Patrimonial or economical rights are something different. In fact, we're talking about money, we're talking about revenues, we're talking about royalties. These are transferable. It means that the creator can transfer them to someone else, to an organization, to take care of it under condition, and these conditions are stated in an agreement. These patrimonial economical rights are limited into time. Most of the time, it's 70 years after the author's death. It depends on the country. For example, in France, you don't count the year of war into that account. So, for example, there were 4 years of war between 1940 and 1944. So they cannot be taken into account for something that was some piece of work that was created before that war and whose creator would still be alive, which or would have died about 30 years ago. In the US, it's even more complicated. But for example, what we called public domain rights. So it means that sorry. The patrimonial rights are over. For example, a character such as Popeye, which is very popular into comics and animation field, is now into public domain, as it was created in 1927 by E.C. Segar, a great creator and cartoonist who passed away in 1938. So what are the field application of these economical patrimonial rights? Sorry about it. Many fields of application, such as unique piece sale. Of course, you have you painted Canva and you sell it maybe through a gallery or directly. Performance, so it applies mainly for music and for a theater play or for opera. Reproduction, and this one does really concern comic author. Exhibition, whenever someone can buy a painting that doesn't give him the right, he can own it, he owns the object, but that doesn't give him the right to exhibit it in public. He can exhibit it in his own place, in his private place, but when it gets to a public place, he doesn't have that right. And if he wants to exhibit it, he needs to have the authorization of the right holder and eventually to pay something for these rights. Diffusion, distribution can be through digital through the internet, adaptation from a comic book to a movie, from a theater play to an opera, etc., etc., and licensing any kind of product that can be produced with the image of the piece of work means also patrimonial rights. And one that is not very well known and not applied in every country, including in the US, and as long as I know, was not also implied in Armenia and Georgia. I don't know about Ukraine. Is the resale rights, something that came up in France and in Europe at the end of the 19th century, especially around this affair of L'Angélus by Jean-François Millet. Jean-François Millet was a painter who lived with very, very low revenues, and this painting was sold by him for a very low price. And after his death, the painting kept on being sold from auction to galleries, auction galleries, and its cost was getting more and more important, while his children were very poor. And so with the work of their father, they would see people making fortunes out of it. So a regulation came up stating that some resale rights had to be transferred back to the right holders during the time of the patrimonial rights. These resale rights are, as long as I remember, I think it's 6% of the sale, when the sale is in France over 700 euros. Then there are also collective copyrights. So what we're talking about is that rights that a creator and an author, a right holder, cannot claim directly to the user because there are multiple users. And for example, there is a digital private copying levy. So we're saying levy and not tax, because a tax is something that is paid and that goes into the government budget, and that's not the case. It's something that is paid for when you buy, for example, a telephone or a USB key. It is paid, but not to go to the government budget, but to be given back to different creators. So digital private copy started not with digital era, but with the release of, maybe you remember that, the magnetic cassette tape that were started in the 70s to record music. And in Germany, right holders for music said that some of their piece of work was copied, used for a private use, and they didn't get copyrights out of it. So a special levy, people would say a special tax, but I don't agree with that, was taken for each sale of cassette tape to be given to the artist. Nowadays, cassette doesn't exist anymore. In the 80s, then you had the VHS tapes that were becoming very popular, and there also copyright holders of movies asked to have this special levy so that they would get also copyrights from their piece of work. And nowadays, any kind of piece of work can be copied on any kind of digital support, mostly telephones, I mean smartphones, USB key, hard disk drive, etc., etc. So in many countries now, for example, in France, when you buy a telephone, depending on the size of the memory, a levy would be paid in between, I think it's €5 to €15. And this money is collected and then redistributed through different organizations that we call collective management organization, CMO, to be redistributed to creators in every field: music, cinema, painting, architecture, and of course, comics. So I was working for one of these companies called ADAGP in Paris. And their future collective rights, because it seems that it's more and more difficult to follow copies and to get rights on copies, and especially today with the AI new platform, generative AI, that produce drawings themselves, it's machines. But where did these machines get their model? We all know that copies, that we would say illegal copies, were done to train this AI engine. For example, I asked to one of them to draw a portrait of myself in round style, the character you saw before. And I got this drawing. Wow, not so bad. And not so bad even for me, because I like myself like this. But who's the creator? Who's the right holder of this image? Is it François M, the photographer of my picture, that were probably used for that? Is it André Chéret or Roger Lecureux, the creators of RAN? Or is it the platform? So now, as you may know, there are more and more lawsuits being targeted to these AI platforms because they didn't have any agreement for using the pieces of work of thousands and thousands of creators. They claim that they were into an exception of copyrights for research, but it seems that now they're using it for a commercial purpose. So maybe tomorrow there will be new collective rights with AI. So now when we apply copyrights to comic books, what are the fields of application? In fact, most of the field of application we saw for general arts are still applicable to comics. Of course, the most important one is reproduction through publishers. What is the role of a publisher? When you are a comic creator, you might want to transfer the rights of your creation of a comic that you draw, which is not yet a book, to a publisher. What will the publisher do with it? First, he might support you when you are creating all the boards, drawing all the boards, and or drawing digitally or on paper. Then he will edit the book, which means he will do the editing of each pages, Then he will design the book. He might ask for an illustrator to illustrate the cover, or he would use one of your illustration for that. He will product it, print it, find the right paper, find the right material for the cover. He will produce a digital format. He will be careful about reprints also when the book will be sold, and if all the copies are sold, you need a reprint immediately. He's going to be marketing your book through public public advertising, or going to see different journalists to talk about the book. He will maybe eventually do a commercial campaign. He will try to introduce the book into different kind of events. That can be signing, that can be festivals, other activities around marketing. He will have sales representative that will go to different bookstores to distribute the book. And then he will use big big organization, so that every bookstore can get your book and can sell your book. He can represent you also for licensing and adaptation of that book in other languages or on other support. And of course, he has to be a good businessman for accounting and management, and to give you back royalties on the sale of your books. Do you really need a publisher? Honestly, I know a lot of creators who are going through self-publishing, and some have been successful. Maybe Jeff Smith, who published Bond, and the whole story was self-published by himself into comic books, these little booklets, then into albums and graphic novels. But yet he's not his own publisher anymore. I'd say that probably an author who self-published spends half of his time as a publisher of his own creation, which is big, sometimes even more. There is an example recently in France, Riyad Satouf, who created L'Arabe du Futur. It's one of the major bestseller in France, who finally created his own company to publish himself. But I guess that he works with agents, and that in his own company, he has at least 5 or 6 salaries, people working for him to promote his books, to produce his books, etc., etc. So these are examples that are not very common. And if we're talking about big success and bestsellers in France, recently a series that has now 4 books being published by Dominique Bertaille, Jean-David Morvan, and Madeleine Riffaut, Madeleine Résistante. It's the story of a partisan in France who just passed away when she was 100 years old very recently. So she told about her life and what happened to her during Second World War, during the occupation. She was not even an adult, and she was already a fighter. So these comic books are sold over, I would say, 150,000 copies for each new book, and it has become a phenomenon. Without being published by a major publishing company, Dupuis in France, I don't think that these three authors, creators, would have been able to get such a success. So let's go back to what happens usually. You have authors, you have a publisher, and to have a transfer of rights, you need an agreement. An agreement that is going to be most of the time presented by the publisher and accepted, maybe after some negotiation, and signed by the authors. The problem is that most of the time, the publisher has a big experience about agreements and has his own needs, and authors don't have much experience, and the relation in between them can be very unbalanced. So what are the main points of these agreements, these contracts in between creators, authors, and publishers? First, you have to describe the parties, the description of the work, and everything that has to be set up. When will the piece of work be delivered? How will it be accepted by the publisher so that he can make a book out of it? There are grant of rights, which is on which scope do we apply the transfer of rights? Just for the book or for other application? There are publication details, of course. What will be the format of the book? What will be the price? Some time, and I'd wish it would be always, the marketing and promotion commitment from the publisher, because it's a very important part to know if the publication is going to succeed, is going to be sold or not. The duration of the grant, most of the time, a publisher will propose you to get to represent your rights for all the time of the patrimonial rights, which means 70 years after you passed away. And honestly, I'm not sure it's the best agreement you can get. Advance on royalties, so the publisher will give you some money in advance so that you can produce the piece of work more or less comfortably. We'll see later how much this advance can be. The rates of the royalties, how many % of the sale will you get? The subsidiary rights, so such as a translation, adaptation, and how are the revenues going to be splitted in between the publisher and yourself? The warranties, for example, you work on a book and finally the book is not published for different reasons. What will happen to you? The author's obligation out of producing the book, will he be available for marketing? Will he cooperate if his picture needs to be taken, for example, and put on posters, etc., etc.? how does the agreement terminate? And that is very, very important also. If you're at the end of the commercialization of the book, what will happen of the left copies? Will they be destroyed? Will they be sold on sale for a very low price and you wouldn't get any rights on it? That's another point. And the option clause on future works, if there are, usually there shouldn't be. If you have an agreement with one publisher, it doesn't mean that all the piece of work, all the comics you will work on have to be published by the same publisher. But it depends on the regulation of different countries. When you negotiate this agreement with the publisher, what is good to know is that the publisher will give you the agreement, the best agreement in his favor. And of course, when it's your first book, for example, you really want that book to be published. So you don't want to really negotiate because you are scared that the agreement won't be available anymore and that you wouldn't find another publisher. But you have to look at it twice. And you have to know that for a publisher, his catalog, all the rights he represents, is like his war chest. I mean by that, for example, nowadays we have a case with Humanoid Associé. Humanoids, it's a publishing company that went into bankruptcy several times. But the rights that this company hold were then transferred to other companies, so that the same person who owns these companies that went bankrupt created new companies and could keep on going with the rights he holds. The creators of these books, of these works, were not allowed to get them back and to find new publishers for their books. And this company went into bankruptcy again very recently, a few weeks ago. But we know that there is a new company that has been formed called Métal Hurlant that is publishing the Métal Hurlant magazine, or MOOC. But we don't know where are the rights, and yet most of the authors, the creators of the books published by the whole group Humanoids, well, these authors don't know what to do with their books if they can have it published somewhere else. The key point that you have to look for it is, of course, the grant of rights and territory. For which language, for which countries are you transferring your rights? For Please Comic Rights and Events, we do work with authors or with publishers, but on different territories. And for some authors were published in their own country by publishers, but they kept for themselves the representation for their books, and now we're working with them on that. If their own publisher was going to get new publishers abroad for their books, they would get, most of the time, 50% of the rights that would have come from this new publication. And when they're working with us, that's different. Advance and royalty structure, so that's something, of course, it's probably the key point of most of it, the subsidiary rights that we were talking about, and of course, what are the termination of of the agreement. And of course, you have to look for the obligation and restrictions that you can have. Now, I'm gonna be very on a French base because it's hard for me to sum up what are the practice in different territories. But in France, some of the figures, and I say informal because it's very hard to have serious studies about it. So that's more about what witnessed about it. The advance royalties, so the money that a publisher can give to a creator for producing a book, a creator or creators, it can go from €0 to 50,000 euros, maybe more for a very, very big author that can sell, I would say, for Asterix, for example, that sells over 1 million over copy for each new book. The royalties given to the authors are from 8 to 12% of the price out of taxes of the selling price. So most of the time it's more 8%, sometimes 10% with some independent publisher, and 12% it means that the book has a big success. The average print is very low. There are over, I think, 60,000 different comic books published in France each year. So the average print and the average sales are very low compared if you compare it to the big sales, to the bestsellers that are over 50,000 copies, 100,000 copies. So the average print is 3,000. The average sales is 2,000, maybe even less. I've seen a lot of books that sold less than 1,000 copies. So you have to be very careful about it. And the average price about 17 euros, but some prices can go from 8 euros for a manga type book to 35, 40 euros for a graphic novel. So the average, I would say, out of these figures, the average royalties for a book publication, for a comic book publication, if that comic book is sold 70 euros, you have to deduct the VAT, 5.5%. If there are 2,000 copies sold and that the creators get royalties of 10% of that book, that will be 3,000 euros, 3,213 euros, but that's about an average. But really, these figures have to be taken very carefully because many of the royalties are lower than that. So it's not much. It's not much when you think that most of the time a creator spent 1 year on a book, on a single book, especially to be with the French figures. The minimum salary net revenues is 1,500 euros per month. So which means that these average royalties are about the same than 2 months work if you work at McDonald's, for example. So I went across, the problem is how to figure out what is the satisfaction for the publication of a book for an author and for a publisher. I went across a a blog by Édition Lapin, which is a very, very small publisher in France, about his sales and how revenues are shared when he publishes a book with different 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 context. Apparently, this publisher gives 1,000 euros royalties in advance for its authors, and give royalties. So, which means that the author can be satisfied when he gets royalties over the advance, and that this goes when these royalties are over 1,000 euros. So, for the first case, when the sales are a failure, only 230 copies sold, when 800 were printed, and 800, it's not much. It means that the publisher himself knew that he won't sell a lot of books, though only a third of the book produced were sold. So in that case, it's terrible for the publisher. He's losing nearly 2,000 euros when the author had 1,000 euros. And most of the price of the book was spent on in bookstores. Bookstore owner got some revenues from it. Of course, the printing company did get a good share of it, 20%, 40% for the bookstore owner, and for the distributor also. But for the publisher, it's a failure, a big failure. The other case is when a book has to be reprinted, so it's a success. The first print was 2,000 copies, then 1,500 copies were printed after that. And there were 1,000 euros royalties in advance for the authors. So copies sold were 2,300 copies, which allowed the author to be a bit above the 1,000 euros royalties he had. So I wouldn't say that he's very happy. He's just a bit happy. But the publisher there is much more happy because he gained more rights in that in this operation, and so got a bit of revenues out of it. And the extraordinary case when it's a bestseller, as far as Édition Lapin are concerned, and for a major publisher, 4,000 copy is not a bestseller. It's it's not a good sell. So then the author is much more happy because he doubled and even more his in advance. And for the publisher, got much more revenues, much more benefits out of it that he can invest in new books. And that's about the game, is that the publisher needs to have 1 or 2 success in order to support 5, 6, 10 other titles. Fortunately, there are other copyright applications for comic artists and other source of revenues. Of course, there are incomes from selling, licensing original artwork, can make books out of original artworks also with other publishers. There are book signing. So usually during an event such as a festival, Authors are invited most of the time if they are not self-published, so they get their traveling paid, housing paid, food paid, and they sign books. What do they get out of the signing books? The fact that during 3 days they cannot work. They are just there for 2 or 3 days for signing the books. Well, they would get only the royalties from the books they sell for signing. Or they can buy books from their publisher, most of the time half the price, which I think is not very fair, and get revenues from direct selling, half of the price of the book, to people that are coming and buying the books, and they will sign the book. But recently, author organization and unions, association in France started asking for something different. And now in most major comic festival in France, authors get paid 250 euros for their participation in the event. There are other ways of getting revenues, exhibition. Now, also when there is an exhibition, the authors, the creators that are exhibited has to be paid. Usually they are paid 1,000 euro for a monographic exhibition for only one author. Then if there are 2-3 authors, these 1,000 euros are divided are divided by the number of creators being exhibited, with a minimum wage of 150 euros. There are performances, for example, concerts with live drawing that can get revenues, residencies. Some creators can be in residencies in different places by different institutions, and then getting a bit of revenues out of it. But most of the time they have also to help workshops. They can get grants, and they can get also collective rights via CMO, other ones than the one we were talking about. What is important and that's really something specific to comic book, is that sometimes there are not one author, but 2 or 3 authors, sometimes even more. And we have an example here with one script writer, 2 artists, 2 drawers, and 1 colorist. And the 4 of them are quoted on the cover of the book. How do we divide? How do we split these rights? That's something there is absolutely no regulation about it. Generally, what I've seen is that, for example, when you have only a script writer and a drawer, the advance on the royalties are divided by 33, 1/3 for the writer and 2/3 for the drawer. But the royalties, global royalties, are divided 50%, 50% for each one of them. But there is no real regulation about it. And if the authors don't have their own agreement before signing the agreement with the publisher, most of the time it's the publisher who decides who's going to get the rights. But then you have the rights for original selling, for example. Most of the time, these rights are gained only by the drawer. Is it totally fair? That's a question. Sometimes the scriptwriter asks the drawer to give a share of the revenues, or to give him on a book of 50 pages, to give him 10 pages on these books that he will use as he wants. And that is something that has to be agreed in between the authors, and I would say at the beginning of the project. So about also collective rights, specifically for books, in France and in most countries now in Europe, there are lending levy for libraries. When a library acquire a book that it will lend to its readers, there is a special levy being paid for that. And then these amounts are then transferred by a CMO called Sophia to all the different creators of the books. For in the future, there are lots of talks today about resale levy. Nowadays, second-hand books are becoming a big part of the selling of books. From the last research that were done, 24%, 25%. One book out of 4 being sold are second-hand books. So that means another use of the copyright, another use of the piece of work. And now more and more organization and even government are thinking about getting revenues out of it, having copyrights being paid for the publisher and for the authors through CMO, and that would be probably in France, Sophia that would get it. So I'm getting to the end of the presentation. Just one small detail at the end about Raon, which I told before. You know, Raon was a character, a jungle-like character such as Tarzan. Nowadays, Tarzan should be in public domain, as its creator, Rice Garborough, created Tarzan in, I think, 1913 into pulp magazine. So it was short stories, then adapted into comic books. Though you can't, because it was not the only jungle-type character that existed at the time, but it's the only one who survived. Because Edgar Rice Burroughs had the very good idea to declare it as a trademark. And it's not the same rights that apply to trademark, it's industrial rights. These rights can be renewed, I think, each 5 or 10 years. And that still protects the creation of Edgar Rice Burroughs. And just to tell you that even if you think that copyrights, intellectual property, some people would say that are overprotected, industrial property is much better protected than artistic copyrights. Well, I'm open to Q&A. I hope that I was heard, because I couldn't have any feedback during my talk, and I don't even know how long did I speak.
Laurent, okay. You were heard. It was really very, very interesting. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We do not have any questions at this moment, only some words of gratitude. Thanks for the interesting and very informative webinar. I want to mention that I am myself a literary agent for the mostly fiction writers, and I know pretty much about copyright, but not about other relevant rights that you were telling us about, especially for comic artists and for, subsidiary rights and how that works. So it was indeed very, very helpful. We're thankful to you and to the audience that was part of this webinar. I want to remind everyone that this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel for only 1 year, because that is also a copyright issue, an agreement that we made with Laurent about that, about the term of this content available to public. Yes, but we will make this video available with subtitles in Armenian, Georgian, and Ukrainian, so that more artists can reach and learn. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening, and we hope to be able to work with you on some occasion sometime soon.
With pleasure. So I can be contacted through. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and through Please Comics website. And I'm open to any question about copyrights and about the comic industry, of course. And I do hope that comics are going to develop very well in the 3 countries. I know that for Ukraine there is even now
Yes.
a big activity, and I'm very pleased about that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and have a nice evening.
Thank you, Arevik. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.